Hopefully you're all aware this is ENGR 221, Electrical Engineering Circuits 1. You're obviously here, so you know the classroom is IESB 112, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 to 9:50. My office is in Nethkin Hall, room 211. For those of you that are unfamiliar with where Nethkin Hall is, it's the one that's catty corner to the IESB. So when you go out the main doors of the atrium, the one directly across, that's Nethkin. I'm up on the second floor, way in the back. My office hours are going to be from Wednesday and Friday, 2 to 5 p.m., and Tuesday, Thursday from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Those Tuesday and Thursday office hours are specifically dedicated to what I usually call Eta Kappa Nu circuits tutoring. So I am the faculty advisor for the Electrical Engineering Honor Society. And so I save a classroom over in Nethkin Hall, and my Honor Society students and I just do free circuits tutoring twice a week. As soon as I figure out when the IEEE study nights will be, I'll let you guys know about that as well, but there should be 2 to 3 opportunities to get help on your homeworks and all that kind of good stuff outside of like normal office hours and all that kind of jazz. I have a tendency to roam around campus because I'm involved in lots of things. I try to be in my office during my office hours as much as possible, but it's always a good idea to shoot me an email and make sure that I'm not intending to roam off or anything like that. So just as a heads up for that kind of good stuff. All right, emergency class disruption policy. If things go bad for whatever reason, we'll be continuing the course over Canvas and Zoom. At least one of you have already figured out that there's a Zoom link and all of that kind of good stuff. Course objectives. Here's a bunch of words. Effectively, we're going to learn probably way too much information about circuits in this particular class. Okay. We're going to start by looking at things from a DC circuit analysis standpoint. Then we're going to look at what's called transient analysis. So that's our transition from DC to AC. And then lastly, we're going to do some AC analysis. And you guys are going to at least hear more than you would ever want to know about circuits for an introductory course, but that'll be okay. The official textbook for this class is Engineering Circuit Analysis 10th edition by Height, Kemmerly, Phillips, and Durbin. It is a perfectly good book. If you spent money on it, that's fine. You didn't necessarily waste it. However, if you go to Google and you type in ULABY space CAD, this brings you to, oh, well, they changed the website on me. So let's click this other link. Let's see. All right. So this is a free textbook put out by Professor Emeritus from the University of Michigan, which is one of the most preeminent electrical engineering schools in the country. It's completely free. It is a very good textbook. It's not any better than the one that we make you pay for, but it is free, which is why I like it. So feel free to grab yourself a copy of that book if you want to. I record all of my lectures and all that kind of stuff, post it all on YouTube and Canvas. So realistically, you don't need a textbook. I'm going to cover everything that I expect you guys to know. But here's a textbook for you if you want to not spend any money on it. All right. Disability disclosure. If you need testing or classroom accommodations based on a disability, go ahead and send that information in through Testing and Disability Services. I have had students in the past say they wanted to take the first test to see whether or not they needed the extended time. Don't be a jackass. If you have the option to take the extended time, do so. Don't shoot yourself in the foot on the first test just to see whether or not you need it, okay? If you have a verified learning disability, you are entitled to that extended time. Make use of it. Let's see, class attendance. So the official class attendance policy is found in policy 2206, available at this here website. The unofficial policy is that you are all adults. If you don't want to be here, that's your prerogative. I'm going to take roll every day because I'm required to do so. If you're ill, everything is available over Zoom and on Canvas. If you don't feel like putting on pants today, everything is available on Zoom, on Canvas, all of that kind of good stuff as well. I would rather interact with students that are engaged and want to be here versus ones that are apathetic and just feel like they're forced to be here. So I'm not forcing anybody to be here if they don't want to be. I will say that the outcomes in the class are typically much better for those students who do bother to show up. But again, you are an adult and you are able to make whatever decision you feel is appropriate with regards to your education. Honor code, boilerplate stuff. Being a student of higher standards, you pledge to embody the principles of academic integrity. Then we get this little section about academic misconduct, which is all defined in the university catalog. Effectively, there's a section on behavior with an official policy. My unofficial policy is if you're less of a jerk than I am, then we're going to get along great. Don't be rude or disruptive to your fellow classmates, all that kind of good stuff. Cheating, there's an official policy here. I am not a fan of cheating at all. I will do any and everything in my power to make sure that someone that's caught cheating fails this class. Just to be real clear about it. Excuse me. All right, so homeworks in this class are going to be posted on WebWork. You're not going to get your first homework assignment until after Monday's lecture, so no homework for today or anything like that. The specific due date for each homework assignment is going to be listed on WebWork, but the general rule I try to follow is that the homeworks will be due at midnight on the evening after our next class meeting. So what I mean by that specifically is if a homework is assigned on a Monday, it will be due Thursday, the day after Wednesday's class meeting at midnight. I choose to make the homework due at that time so that you are guaranteed to have at least one circuits tutoring session available to you to go ask questions and all of that kind of stuff should you need it. In-class assignments. So after every lecture except today's, I'm going to assign a brief problem set on Canvas. These are to be worked on during the class period for which they are assigned, and they are going to be submitted digitally prior to the next class meeting. I'm going to have all of them up by probably tomorrow evening for the entire quarter for those of you that want to print them out and all of that kind of good stuff. So let me talk about the in-class assignments because this is something that maybe you guys haven't done before, or at least this is my philosophy on them. Nobody wants to hear me talk about circuits for 2 hours every other day. Not even me, and I'm a very egotistical person. So the in-class assignments are a way for you guys to kind of have a low stakes, like take a crack at problems that are going to be similar to what you're going to see on homeworks and tests and all that kind of good stuff. And I say it's a low stakes thing because these in-class assignments are not graded for completeness, nor are they graded for correctness. I am simply trying to give you guys an opportunity in class to figure out which parts of the lecture didn't make sense so that you have an opportunity to ask questions while I already have time designated available to answer them before you go out and attempt the homeworks and all of that kind of stuff and struggle and get frustrated and pissed off and all that kind of jazz, okay? So I want to repeat, they are not graded for completeness, so whatever you get done during class is perfectly acceptable. They are not graded for correctness, so it doesn't matter to me whatsoever whether you got the right answer or something close to it or something far away. All I'm asking you to do is try so that you can identify where you might have misunderstood something or where I might have taught something poorly, okay? So it's effectively a participation grade. So that means that you only get credit for them if you're actively working on them, not watching soccer on your phone or some other such nonsense, which I've definitely had students do before. Okay. Any questions regarding the in-class assignments? Okay. There are going to be 8 mini lab assignments that are completed throughout the quarter. Our first one is going to be actually at the end of this upcoming Monday's class meeting. These labs will require a kit from the project-based learning office. So let me talk about that very, very briefly. The kit that I'm asking you guys to purchase contains some components that you guys did not get in your freshman kits, which means you do actually need to purchase them. The cost is $10, okay? And not everybody needs to buy the kit because these mini lab assignments are to be completed in groups. So realistically, and the groups are 3 to 4 students, or I guess that on here I have it 2 to 4 students. So realistically, 1 to 2 people at each table need to spend $10 for everybody at that table to be able to participate in the mini lab assignments. So perhaps identify somebody at your table who's very unlikely to wind up dropping the class, and then give them $2.50 or $3 so that you guys can subsidize the cost and buy a kit or two for your table, and you'll be good to go. On the tentative course schedule here, which we'll get to in a moment, it specifically says which class meetings have a mini lab associated with them. So these are the days that I'm expecting you to bring your little kits and all that kind of stuff. You're also going to need to bring a digital multimeter on any day that we're having a mini lab assignment. There are some that are available in a cabinet here in this room, but they have been used by students for years and years and years, which means any current measurements that you need to do will not work because I guarantee all of the fuses have been blown and I do not have the time or mental bandwidth to replace the fuse in literally 130 multimeters. So if you need to make a current measurement, you probably want to bring your own. All right, let's see. Exams. So there are going to be 3 exams given during this course. All exams are closed book, and I have on here, they're all closed notes. I will provide an equation sheet to you for exam 3 and exam 3 only. Okay, that'll be integrated into the test. The reason why you get an equation sheet on exam 3 and exam 3 only is because the last several days of class, we're going to cover complex power, which is just a ton of different mathematical relationships. And I think it's unfair to make you guys try to memorize / learn like 14 relationships in one day before you take your final. So I give you a little cheat sheet just for that material kind of thing. Let's see. No makeup exams unless you let me know why you're having to miss the exam and all of that kind of good stuff. Only FE approved calculators are permitted for usage during the exams. So let's talk about FE approved calculators real quick. I have a pile of calculators here. These are my personal favorites. So according to NCEES, which is the organization that puts on the fundamentals of engineering exam, there's only 6 calculators that can be allowed for use on that exam. It is the HP 33S and the HP 35S. If any of you use HP calculators, more power to you. That stuff is black magic to me. I do not understand how they work at all, and I cannot help you sort out how to use that particular calculator for this class. I feel like there's probably lots of good YouTube videos and all that kind of stuff. I literally only have maybe 1 or 2 students a year that bother with HP calculators, so I've just never bothered to learn how to use them. Then we have the Casio 115. This is a pretty good calculator. The Casio 991 ClassWiz is a very good calculator. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, Casio decided to discontinue this calculator fairly recently. So be extraordinarily wary if you want to buy one of these off of eBay, because I've had students in this class buy a knockoff on accident. Or I guess knockoff isn't the right word, because it was presented as a Casio. It was a counterfeit calculator, and it could do some basic things, but when they tried to do some of the more complex stuff, it constantly gave them math errors, and they wound up making like a 45 on a test where they legitimately should have made a 70 or an 80 just because their counterfeit calculator failed them. So be very wary about buying calculators off of eBay. How many of you guys have a TI-30? Is that one in front of you, Carolyn? Okay, that's a 36. Good. So if you have a TI 30, oh, there's one. So that's a peasant calculator. Sorry. It's utter crap for this class, and you're going to need to shell out like $5 more or whatever and upgrade to the TI 36. So I'm saying that very flippantly, but we're going to do a lot of math involving complex numbers in multiple forms. And that calculator literally just can't keep up. So every other calculator that I've mentioned, either the TI 36, which is my personal favorite calculator for this class's material, or the Casio 115 or the Casio 991, can all do that complex math much more quickly and efficiently. So it will save you literally 15 minutes per problem if you bother to upgrade your calculator. So I would highly suggest it. If for whatever reason somebody cannot afford a new calculator, come see me after class. I think I have 5 of these TI 36s, 3 or 4 of these Casio 115s, and I think I have 1 spare Casio 991 that I'd be willing to let somebody borrow, just to make sure that everybody has access to the tools that they need to be successful in this class. All right, calculator rant over. Anybody have any questions about calculators? All right. So, should be fairly obvious, but all exams have a no cell phone policy. So if your cell phone is out or I catch you on your cell phone during the test, congratulations on your 0. I will see you next quarter. The weighting of the grades in this class is as follows. So the web work assignments are 15%. So that is 1.5 letter grades, which means even though the web work assignments are objectively terrible, you still need to do them. They are practice for what's going on. Okay. We have the in-class assignments, which, as I mentioned, is just a participation grade for 5%. We have the mini labs, which are an additional 5%. And then exam 1, which is covering DC circuit analysis techniques, is 30%. Exam 2, which covers transient analysis, Thevenin and Norton equivalent circuits, is 30%. And then exam 3, which covers op amps and AC circuit analysis, is 30%. If you add all of those things together, it comes out to 115%. So what I do is the weight of the exam on which you receive your lowest score is reduced by half. So you can make a 33.3 on one test, and as long as you make 100 on literally everything else, you can still make an A in this class. Most people that make a 33 on one of the exams don't wind up making 100 on everything else, but I'm trying to impart to you that it is recoverable if you do poorly on exam 1. And I'm mentioning exam 1 specifically because, in my opinion, the first test in this class is by far the most difficult. We cover a lot of material. Ashton, you're looking at me incredulously. I'm not messing with you. Exam 1 is the hardest exam in this class because we cover so much material so quickly. You guys are expected to know just a ton of things before we hit exam 1. It slows down quite a bit for exam 2. And then the exam 3 material, dealing with the AC circuits, it's going to seem like it's rather difficult at first, but it is literally nothing but the material that we did for exam 1, except that it's just using complex numbers. Okay. So exam 1 will kick a lot of folks' ass. The average score for exam 1 in the past usually is somewhere in the ballpark of 65%. I have seen it be as low as 50. And that's across all sections. So I'm giving you guys plenty of warning. Exam 1 can be rather brutal. I am working with Miss Ward and Dr. Mirzai to try to be mildly less of a jerk on exam 1 because I'm responsible for making all the tests for this class. So I'm going to try to be a little bit nicer than I usually am. That being said, and I know you guys are going to hate hearing this, I firmly believe that I only give easy tests. You guys tell me I'm wrong every opportunity you can. So I'm going to get a second set of eyes at a minimum to look at the test and say, hey, Matt, you're being maybe more of a dick than you intended. Tone it down a little bit. Okay. Anyway, so there we go. Let's see. Grading scale is a standard 10-point scale. I fundamentally do not believe in curving or rounding grades, literally at all. So if you want to make an A in this class, you need to hit a 90% or higher. That being said, if I make a mistake on a test or something like that, I have no problem owning that mistake and throwing that problem out and giving everybody credit for it. So I'm not going to punish anybody for my mistakes by any stretch of the imagination, but the bar for making an A in this class is kind of high. So just putting it out there. All right, syllabus changes. So I don't expect anything on the syllabus to change. However, I reserve the right to do so. And if I do have to change anything, I will let you know. Then we have the emergency notification system stuff. I encourage all of you to sign up for that if you aren't already signed up. Then I have our COVID-19 policy, which is effectively just if you're sick, don't come to class and get me sick, or I will be very upset with you. Counseling services, information is available if you feel that you need it. And then we have our tentative course schedule. So your first exam will be at the end of September on a Monday evening, September 30th at 6 p.m. I don't remember exactly what room I have the exam scheduled for, but I have already scheduled it. So I will let you guys know about that as soon as I go back through my emails and sort that out. Exam 2 is on Monday, October 21st. And exam 3 is on Monday, November 11th. If you'll notice, there is a mini lab makeup day on Wednesday, November the 13th. So if for whatever reason you happen to not physically attend class on a day that we have a mini lab, there is already a day built in to make those mini labs up. So please do not come harass me saying, oh, how can I make this lab up? It's literally right here on the syllabus. There's already a day dedicated to that. For whatever reason, I very regularly have students come and have to do 5 of the 8 mini labs on that day because they realize that they need those, I guess it would be 3.75 points in order to make the grade that they need in the class. So anyway, it's already there. So if you miss a mini lab, it's not the end of the world. There's already a day to make them up. All right, I believe that concludes the syllabus. So any questions, comments, or concerns other that I'm gonna ask? Yes. Okay. So we will figure something out come November, it sounds like. Yeah. You're not a graduating senior, are you? Okay, yeah, that'll make things less of a pain in the butt. Yes. So on those 3 Mondays, the class meeting is optional. So I will be here to hold a review for students that want to review stuff. But if you want to sleep in, you're not technically missing anything. Nothing that's covered on the review days will be new. It'll just be clarifying things. Anything else? All right. So let's start taking some notes. So today we're going to be talking about basic circuits terminology. And this lecture is effectively just for us to be all on the same page as to how I'm going to refer to things throughout this class, because the jargon within the field of electrical engineering can often be intimidating. So we're going to kick things off by talking about networks, nodes and serial and parallel connections, or let's call it series because that's the term you're probably more familiar with. Okay. So I'm going to draw a circuit element here, and I'm going to call this circuit element element A. So we just have this generic box to start with. And this box could represent a resistor, a capacitor, an inductor, a diode, a battery, a transistor. Really, it could be absolutely anything, okay? Anything that's part of an electrical circuit. Okay? Now, I am going to add to this box a pair of terminals, okay? So we're going to have a terminal on the top, and now we have a terminal on the bottom, which means the different types of element that this thing could be, that list just got a bit shorter because we're dealing specifically with a two-terminal element. So that would be like a resistor or a diode or a capacitor or a battery. It's definitely not an operational amplifier or a transistor or anything like that, okay? So these terminals are where we make our electrical connections, or they're what allow us to connect this particular circuit element to other circuit elements, wires, and all of that kind of good stuff. So if I drew another two-terminal circuit element, let's call it element B right here, I could connect these two elements together. And whenever I have two or more circuit elements connected together, they form what's called a network. Okay? So let's define a network to be an interconnection between two or more circuit elements. And the points at which we can make these connections are going to be referred to as nodes. Okay. So we will define a node as a point of interconnection between circuit elements. Okay. So as it stands right now, the network that I have described here, where we have a circuit element A connected to a circuit element B, has three nodes, okay? So we have this node right here, where A and B are connected. We have this node down here, which is currently dangling, but we could connect something else there. So that's going to count as a node. And then we have our third node over here on the other side of B. Again, it's a dangling connection, but we could connect something there. So it's a node as well. Okay. So whenever we connect more circuit elements to a network, we have an opportunity to create more nodes. So for instance, if I had a circuit element C here, and a circuit element D over here, I might connect these points with a wire and all of these points with a wire. Well, I've added more elements, and as it turns out, it maybe gets a little bit harder to identify our nodes when we have a network that's kind of busy like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-identify my nodes in a particular way that helps me kind of understand and sort out what's going on. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at element A, just one side or the other. So I'm starting at the top, and I'm just going to leave element A and follow along that terminal and keep going until I hit another circuit element. And I'm going to call that larger thing a node as well. So we have this one large node here in red. I'm going to label it as node number 1. Now let's leave from the bottom side of A. We're going to go along, and now we hit this point here where we can branch off, and so I'm going to have to make sure that I include both of those branching paths as part of this node, right? So up to C, we're still on the same node. Out and up to D, still on the same node. So this whole big blue thing is our second node. So I am going to be lazy and call that node 2. And lastly, I'm going to come out here from element B, and once again I see a branching path. So I can go down like so to connect to element C, or out and down like so to connect to element D. And so we have a third node here. So this particular network contains 3 elements and 4 nodes. I've made it a point to be very methodical in how I am describing and identifying my nodes, because the ability to accurately identify nodes is going to be a fundamental part of one of the circuit analysis techniques that we're going to deal with in this class, called nodal analysis. That's one of the first really big things that you're going to learn in this class, where you're going to be like, why on earth didn't they teach us this in the Engineering 120 series? It tends to make things so much easier. Okay? So one of the parts of that process is being able to identify nodes. And this is the way, even as a jackass with a PhD who's been doing this for years, this is how I tend to identify nodes in any network that is even remotely complicated. I like to use different colors, and you'll see why in just a moment. So if this makes sense to you, by all means, bring colored pencils and all of that kind of good stuff with you when you take your exam. I genuinely think it will help you do better on the test. All right, so let's look at some of these nodes, okay? So if we were to look at node 1, or how circuit elements A and B are connected to each other, we can see that this is a point of interconnection, or a node, but there are no paths that are branching off of that, right? It's just a direct path from element A to element B. So we are going to call that a series electrical connection. So a series connection is a connection between 2, I'm going to underline it so I remember to talk about it in a moment, circuit elements with no branching paths. Now, the reason why I'm saying specifically two circuit elements here is because we are going to learn a little something called Kirchhoff's current law next Wednesday. You guys already should have a little bit of familiarity with it. But after we learn Kirchhoff's current law, we are going to adapt our definition of a series connection to include the information that Kirchhoff's current law provides us, where we have more than two elements that are connected in a particular way. So for right now, a series connection is only capable between two elements. But once we learn a little bit more, we're going to expand this definition to incorporate our greater knowledge, okay? So it might be a little different than what you're used to just yet, but we'll get to what you're used to within a couple of class meetings. Now, let's look at how elements C and D are connected to each other. And this is where the colors really tend to help me out, okay? So we can see that the top terminals of elements C and D are both connected to the green node, and the bottom terminals of elements C and D are both connected to the blue node. So whenever we have a number of elements that share nodes like this, so they share node 3 and they share node 2, we consider those elements to be connected in parallel. Okay? So a parallel connection is a connection between two or more circuit elements where, I'm going to underline both here, both sets of terminal pairs are shared. So the reason why I underlined both here is because the network that we're looking at, let me bring it back onto the screen fully, contains only two terminal circuit elements, okay? For those of you that are electrical engineering majors, by the time that we hit your junior year, and we start dealing with transistor circuits, which are three terminal circuit elements, we're going to be connecting those in parallel as well. And for a three terminal circuit element to be connected in parallel, all three terminals need to be shared with other things, right? So for circuits 1 here, where other than the operational amplifier, every single thing we're going to be dealing with is a two terminal element, this definition is perfectly valid because both sets of terminals need to be shared. But realistically, a better way to put it would be all sets of terminals need to be shared. Okay, so I want to be clear here that to some extent, I'm messing with you. I would like for you guys to tell me how elements B and C are connected to each other. Carolyn, I'm going to pick on you simply because I know your name, so I pre-apologize for that. Are elements B and C connected in series? Exactly correct. There is a branching path that goes off to element D, which means elements B and C cannot be connected in series based on our current definition of a series connection. Ashton, I'm sorry, you're the only, well, actually, no, Faith. I remember your name, unfortunately, I guess, by the look on your face. Are elements B and C connected in parallel? No. Why not? Exactly right. So while they do share the green node, the left-hand terminal of element B is connected to the red node, while the bottom terminal of element C is connected to the blue node. So since they don't share two sets of colors, they can't be connected in parallel either. So elements B and C are not connected in parallel, nor are they connected in series. And that's perfectly okay. Okay. So that's one of the things that I don't believe the Engineering 120 series does a good enough job of describing, is that not everything is going to be connected in series or parallel. Okay. It's perfectly fine that things aren't. We're going to learn some tips and techniques and all of that kind of stuff to draw what are called electrically equivalent circuits that allow us to consider things like they were connected either in series or in parallel, but we can't do that until we get to specific circuit elements like resistors, capacitors, and inductors, and all that kind of good stuff. So right now, while we're just dealing with generic things, this is as good as it's going to get. Some things are going to be in series, some things are going to be in parallel, and some things aren't, and we just have to be okay with that. All right, so let's look at a quick example where you guys are going to kind of tell me what's going on. So I'm going to pop over to another page so I can revisit this thing in a moment. So I'm going to draw a network, and it's going to be a little bit larger and a little bit grosser than the one that we just had. So let's say that we have some element A here, some element B up here, an element C down here, here's element D, E, F, G, and H. And I want us to look at this network and answer the following questions. So our first question will be, how many nodes does this network contain? Then I want us to answer which, sorry, I got ahead of myself there, if any, of the elements are connected in series and lastly, which, if any, of the networks, excuse me, of the elements are connected in parallel. So would anyone care to volunteer? I hesitate to call it a guess, but would anyone care to volunteer their opinion on how many nodes this network contains? Yes. 5. I agree with that completely. So let's take a moment here and just go through the process of identifying those 5 nodes. So we've got this node here where A and B are connected. We've got this node here where B, D, and E are connected. We've got this node here where E, F, G, and H are connected. We've got this node here where A and C are connected. And let me use purple. We've got this node on the bottom where C, D, F, G, and H are connected. So I believe that that is 5 different nodes. So great job. Anybody have any questions on how we identified our nodes here? All right. So someone who I haven't picked on, so this table in front of me is relatively safe. Tell me which elements are connected in series. Yes, sir.
I guess just A, B, and AC.
So A is connected in series to element B, and A is connected in series to element C. Absolutely correct. So we have A and B as well as A and C based on our current definition of a series connection. After we learn a little bit about Kirchhoff's current law, we would probably say that elements C, A, and B are all 3 connected together in series, but we're not quite there yet, so great job. Any other series connected elements? No, absolutely not. So just those 2 pairs. Okay. All right. Which of the elements are connected in parallel, if any of them? Yes. F, G, and H. So F, G, and H all share that, I don't know, turquoise-ish node in the top right. I'm bad with colors. And they all share that purple node on the bottom. So absolutely correct. F, G, and H are all connected in parallel. Are there any other parallel connected elements? No, right? Those are the only ones that share all the terminals on one side and all of the terminals on the other side. Great job. Okay. Sorry, let me figure out why my laptop isn't charging real quick. There we go. All right, so let's circle back around to that network that we were looking at originally. And I am going to get rid of some of these colors. Actually, no, I won't do that. We'll just continue on this page, sorry. So now we're gonna start thinking about things in the context of circuits, loops, and meshes. So I'm going to redraw that network that we just had a little while ago. So we've got element A, element B, element C, and element D, like so, right? I haven't made any changes or introduced anything new or like anything like that, okay? So we are going to define a circuit as any network that contains at least one closed path. Okay, and we're going to talk about the paths and all that kind of stuff in a minute. In a minute. Okay, so all circuits are networks, but not all networks are circuits, because in order for it to be a circuit, we have to close the loop effectively, right? So as soon as we have these three elements connected together like this, we have a circuit regardless of whatever else is connected to our network, okay? It's not a particularly important distinction, and largely we can use the terms circuit and network interchangeably, but technically there is a very small difference between the two of them. So I'm just making you guys aware of it, okay? Now we're going to define a loop as any closed combination of circuit elements and nodes. So how many loops do you guys think this circuit contains? So I hear 2 and I hear 3. Those are the answers that I'm expecting, one of which is correct. So let's talk about the distinction, right? So one of you guys that said 2, tell me what you think one of those loops is. So A, C to B, or A to B to C. Okay. So something like this, right? Okay. So let's call that number 1. What's the second one that you see? C to D. So something like this. Okay. So somebody who said the answer was 3, tell me what the third one is. Yeah, the one around the outside. Absolutely. That is also a closed loop or closed path. So any closed combination of circuit elements and nodes forms a loop. So correctly identifying loops isn't, let me rephrase that. Correctly identifying the number of loops isn't necessarily going to be that big of a thing in this class. However, there is a special case of a loop, which we call a mesh, that is going to be very important, and it has its own associated circuit analysis tool with it. So we're going to define a mesh to be any loop in a circuit which does not contain a smaller loop. So which of the 3 loops that were identified for this circuit would be considered a mesh? 1 and 2. They don't contain a smaller one. Loop 3 consists of the combination of meshes 1 and 2. Okay. So those are the distinctions between loops and meshes. we are not going to revisit the concept of a mesh probably for another 2 to 3 weeks at this point. I think it's class meeting number 7 or 8 where we start talking about mesh analysis. But our ability to figure out where a loop is going to come into play once we start talking about Kirchhoff's voltage law on Wednesday's class meeting. Okay. So let's wrap things up. I'm going to get out of here a little bit early by revisiting this, now we can call it a circuit, and identifying how many meshes this circuit contains and how many loops this circuit contains. I'm going to get rid of some of these colors so that this doesn't get too wildly busy. Reconnect things, as it were. And we'll add 2 more questions. So question D. How many meshes does the network contain? And lastly, question E. How many loops does the network contain? So let's scroll back up here so you guys can see it. Would anybody care to give me their opinion on the number of meshes? 4. Okay. So I believe that there are 4 meshes as well. So I'll go ahead and identify them really quickly. So we have this left-hand mesh where A, B, C, and D are connected. We have, let's call that mesh 1. We have this left middle triangular looking mesh where D, E, and F form a closed loop. So let's call that one 2. We have this triangular loop around F and G. So let's call that one 3. And then lastly, we have this rectangular loop or square loop or whatever. Around G and H. So 4 different meshes. How many loops do we have? So that question is actually significantly more difficult to figure out. It's not wildly difficult to figure out by any stretch of the imagination. But the way that I like to approach it is by starting with simple things, right? So we could subdivide it and say, well, how many single mesh loops do we have? Well, those are just all of our meshes, right? So there were 4 of those. So we can start from there. How many 2 mesh loops are we going to have? So these are loops that are formed by combining just 2 meshes. Anybody care to venture a guess? So I think there are 3 of them, right? Because we can combine meshes 1 and 2 to get this loop. We could combine meshes 2 and 3 to get this loop. And we could combine meshes 3 and 4 to get this loop, right? So there are 3 2 mesh loops. How many 3 mesh loops are there? Just 2, right? So if we get rid of these, our 3 mesh loops would be this guy right here, which combines 1, 2, and 3, as well as this guy right here, which combines 2, 3, and 4. And then lastly, how many 4 mesh loops do we have? Just the one around the perimeter of the circuit. Adding all of those together is 10 total loops. All right, so that's all that I had prepared for today. So I'll stick around and answer any questions that you guys may have, but if you don't have any questions, feel free to go celebrate Dr. Tim's, the last Popcorn Friday that he'll be involved with, out the door and to your left, and generally just go and enjoy this very dreary Louisiana morning.